Haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Chof Amud Aleph, starting Daf Yutes Amud Beis, 7 lines from the bottom. The Gemara just presented a brisa that states when you have 9 choniyos, 9 stores that sell basar nevela, and 1 store that sells basar shechuta. If a person buys from one of those stores and is not sure from which store he bought it from, the principle is that since he bought it from a place that was kavua, the din is kol kavua kemechza al mechza dami. It's a safek, and therefore he cannot eat it. He has a safek that it's treifa, it's nevela. On the other hand, if you were then have found that meat in the street, then we have another principle, and the principle is called meruba, called the parish meruba parish. We go after the roiv and say, in this scenario, since the majority of stores sell nevela, it is indeed nevela, and it would be also if we would eat it, he'd be chayiv malchus. In the converse situation, where you have 9 chanios that are kosher, and 1 chanus, 1 store that is selling basar nevela, then it would be the opposite scenario. Again, if you would buy it from one of the stores and not be sure which store you bought it from, then it would be a safek, and you could not eat it because maybe it's indeed nevela. However, if you find it on the street, then we have the din of the roiv that called the parush meruba parush, and therefore it's going to be kosher. Rabbi Yochanan comes and says a chiddush that if a Gentile has meat in his hands, then we assume that that meat has the same din as being found in the street. And therefore, again, in the first scenario, it would be considered to be nevela. In the second scenario, it would be considered to be shchuta and kosher. The Gemara now brings several incidents in this vein. Chad barnash b'tzipurin ozil. There was a person from the city of Tzipurin who was going, boy mizbun kupad min tabocha. He wanted to buy meat from the butcher, a kosher butcher. And the butcher did not want to sell to him. He didn't like him for whatever reason, and he didn't want to sell him that kosher meat. So then, the one who wanted to purchase the meat says to a Roman Gentile, and indeed, he got meat from him. So then he comes back to the one he wanted the purchase from, that butcher, and he says to the butcher, Lo nasbis al korche, did I not take against your will? In other words, I have kosher meat now in my hands, even though you didn't want to sell it to me, because I got it from the Gentile, presumably who got it from you. So the butcher responded, V'lav basar de nevela yavisle, did I not sell him basar nevela? And therefore I gave him the basar the nevela. That's what you have in your hands. Rabbi Yirmiyahu b'shem Rabbi Chanina, Maise balifnei Rabbi. This Maise came before Rabbi and was presented to him. V'omar, Rabbi's response was, Loi kula minei meisa mikulin hatzipurin. This butcher is not believed to answer the meat that is in the marketplace of Tzipurin, and therefore, presumably, that he was lying. He was just coming to vex the fellow who wanted to buy it from, but indeed he sold him kosher meat, and therefore the meat that's in hands of this Jew that was given to him or sold to him by this Roman is indeed kosher meat. In other words, there is a minhag amongst such towns that if a nevela was indeed found in the marketplace, in the slaughterhouse, they would make an announcement so that nobody would mistakenly buy nevela from a Gentile. Otherwise, you can assume that the Gentile bought kosher meat from the Jew, and therefore it's kosher meat as well. Rav Nachas letamon chamtu mikilin. Rav, the Gemara tells in another incident, he went down to Bavel, and he saw that they were being makil, they were being lenient. And he then wanted to deal with them in a stringent fashion. Gemara tells the following: Chad barnash ozil. There was a person who went on top of Chof Amud Aleph. Boy mashizga as kupte begoy naharo. He went and wanted to wash his meat inside of the river. V'inshasa v'ozil lei. He forgot it, and he went. He left the meat there. Chozar boy misbina. He then came back to return for that meat, and he wanted to then take it. Omar le Rav. Rav said to him, "Osir loch." That meat is osir to you, because Dana Omar, I would say, Hahi shotaf naharo. The meat that you originally went to clean, to rinse off, that meat that you left there was taken away and swept away by the nahar. Va'aisi churi denevela tachtoi. And there are other nevela meat that now in its place. So this meat that's in your possession is indeed nevela, whereby you can't go ahead and use it. Chad bar Nash, Gemara tells another incident. Hav mahalech b'shuko. There was a person who was going in the marketplace. Toin kupad, and he was carrying meat. Also, daisu v'chatfese minei v'talakte. There was a bird who then took that meat that he was carrying, and it threw it. Chazar boy misvina. It says that this person who was carrying the meat returned to the place where the meat was thrown, presumably, and he wanted to then take it. Omar le Rav. Rav said to him, Osir loch, it's prohibited to you. Dona, because I would say, Basar de nevela havas te'ina, v'talakte, v'nazba, ha'u uchrana. He says, because the bird, he was carrying nevela meat, and that's what he threw over there, and he took the other meat. In other words, that meat that you're finding now is nevela, therefore it's prohibited. Gemara tells over, Ginai shotav zikin. It says that in the area of Ginai, the river swept away these leather pouches that were carrying wine. Also, uvda kumi Rabbi Yitzchok Rabbi Elazar. The Maisa came before Rabbi Yitzchok Rabbi Elazar. V'omar, and he said, Yechakmun shafayo kutroin. These people who are indeed involved in the pouring of the wine in these vessels, let them determine whether this is the tie, the knot that they make. If they can identify it, then indeed it is going to be kosher wine. Nukunte ashtecha b'knishta debuli. The Gemara tells another incident where there was jugs of wine that were found in the Beis HaMedrash, Beis HaKnesses of Buli. Also, uvda kumi Rabbi Yirmiyahu. The Maisa came before Rabbi Yirmiyahu. Omar, he said, Yischakmun sakroyai avidaiton. Let us determine if those who make the red different marks on these vessels, on these jugs, can determine if these are the same types of mark that they make. If indeed they could, then it's going to be kosher wine. If not, then we have to say that this wine is no longer good, cannot be used. Geditz li, another maisa. Geditz li, a gedi that was roasted eshtekach be'asarte den gufta. It was found in the thoroughfares in the area of Gufta. V'hitirua mishum shnei dvorim, and they were matir the geditz li, the roasted gedi, for two different reasons, on two fronts. Mishum mitzio, mishum roiv mahalchi drochim. One, on a monetary front, that means to say that it was considered to be a mitzia, and therefore was able to be taken. So monetarily it did not belong to the owner anymore, and one who found it can take possession. And also mishum roiv mahalchi drochim, from a prohibited standpoint, it's mutter, it's not usr, because the majority of people who travel there are indeed Jews. And explains the Gemara, Mishum Mitziyah the Tani, why is it going to be monetarily permissible to take? Because it says in the Brisa, the Tanya, Hamatzil miyad ha'ori umiyad hagayis, one who finds, one who takes, rescues an object from the hands of a lion or from a platoon of soldiers, Mishunas hayom u'mishunas hanar, from the tide of the sea or the waves of the river, or from a large thoroughfare or a large plaza, hare elu shelo, behold, these objects belong to the one who finds it. Why? Explains the Brisa, the owner has been despaired on these objects. Mishum roiv mahalchei drochim. Why is it mutter and not osir? Granted, the moitzi mitzia is able to then keep it, but who's to say that gedit sli is kosher meat? So we say mishum roiv mahalchei drochim because the majority of people who are traveling there are Jewish. Mishum shchita nachri, and therefore we're not concerned about the shchita of the nachri. The Gemara now tells v'ishtakach mean the base Rebbe, and indeed it was found to come from the house of Rebbe. The Gemara now tells Igul the guvna the eshtakach bepundaka the Levi. There was a round cheese that was found in the pundak, the lodging, the inn of Levi. V'hitiru mishnei dvorim, and they were matir for two different reasons, on two fronts again. Mishum mitzia, mishum roiv mahalchei drochim. Mishum mitzia, as we quoted before, the Tanya. Hamatzil miyad hagayis miyad haori, mishunat hayam mishunat hanahar. Mi isartiya gedoylo mi platiya gedoylo, hare'elu shaloi. These belong to the finder. Mibnei shabai misyashi mehem. So it's not a problem monetarily to keep it. Mishum roiv mahalchei drochim. Also, it's not a problem of being osir because the majority of people there who travel are indeed Jewish. Mishum gevinas nachri. There's not a concern of being the gevina of the nachri. And indeed, the Gemara tells v'ishtachach mean the Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yosi, and indeed it was found to be belonging to Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yosi. The Gemara now says, Omer Mana kumi Rabbi Yosi. Ramana then takes issue in front of Rabbi Yosi and he says, Va'anan chamyon rabbanan machrizin. Behold, we find that the rabbanan would indeed, they would announce such an object that was found, and yet the Brisa tells us, Hare elu shelo, they belong to the one who found it. Omar lei. Rabbi Yosi responds to Rabbi Mona, At in havyosa mashkach lo nasavto. If you would find such an object, you will not keep it. Rabbi Yoina avuch loy omar ken. Your own father, Rabbi Yoina, he did not say so. Elo omar, he would say halavai. It should only be kan nashkach, that we should find it. Nashkach mean puyosir legoy, and find it in an area that is on the outskirts of this area of puyusa, whereby it would be permitted. The Gemara just tells over, however, even though Rabbi Yoina did say that technically one is allowed to keep it. However, Afilu Kain says the Gemara eshkach v'lo nasiv. Rabbi Yonah would find it and he would not keep it for himself. Halacha Gimel, the next Mishnah, tells us of other things that are found. We were talking until now in the beginning of the parak about those coins that were found between the shofaros. More recently, we're talking about meat that was found either in Yerushalayim or in the Gevulos, in the Azora, wherever. Now we're talking about other items that were found. Says the Mishnah, Behema shenimtzeis miyushalayim ve'al migdal eder. Animals that were found between Yerushalayim and the area called Migdal Eder, ukemidasa lekol ruach, or the same distance in all directions, then we can assume there are indeed animals that were hiktishu lekarbonos, and therefore zecharim oilos nekevas zivchei shlomim. Since the majority of the zecharim, of the male animals, are brought as oilos, so therefore we can assume that the animal that is male, going holich basar roiv, is indeed a korban oila. Nekeva, then we can assume that since shlomim can be both zachar and nekeva, and we said just before that the roiv of the zecharim are oilos, so let's say if there was 500 zecharim and 500 nekevos, so therefore the majority of those zecharim are indeed oilos. So let's say 400 of the 500. So although there's an additional 100 of zecharim that could be shlomim, but the majority of the shlomim are indeed, I'm sorry, but the nekevos, since a oila cannot be a nekeva, therefore the nekevos must be shlomim. And again, Shlomim also the majority of karbonos in general. So anyways, the nekevas that are found, the assumption is that the rov it's a Shlomim. So therefore the finder would bring those animals as a carbon, even though they themselves would not get a kapara, but they would then bring a carbon for the bailim. Rabbi Yehuda argues and says, "Harui lipsachim lipsachim." If the animal, let's say it's a keves or an aiz that is 1 year old, then it's fitting to be a carbon pesach. Then he says that indeed we can assume that it's a carbon pesach if it's a male 1 year old aiz or keves. That's providing koydin l'regel lamid yom. That's providing that it was found within 30 days of Pesach, because that's when people are makdish their carbon Pesach, set aside a carbon for their carbon Pesach. The Mishnah continues, Barishona hayu mamamshkinin es moitzia ad shehu mevi nisachel. In the beginning, the Mishnah tells, they would take a mashkoin from the one who found these animals to ensure that they would bring the proper nisachim, which would be wine and oil for these different karbonos. It has to be brought, the oilos and the zvachim have to, and the shlomim have to be brought with nisachim. So therefore, to ensure that they would be brought with the nisachim, so then they took a mashkon of value of an object from these people who found it to ensure that they would bring it. However, subsequently they saw that people who were finding these animals, they were prepared to bring them as karbonos, even though they were not themselves getting the kapara, but they would bring it as a carbon for the bailim. However, they were not prepared to then add from their own money the nesachim, and therefore they would leave. The Gemara then, the Mishnah goes on to say, whereby the bezdin were mesakein that the money that would be required to buy nisachim would come from the tzibur, namely the lishka. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah goes on to say, not only was this one of the takanas, but there are additional takanas. Amar Rabbi Shimon, Zayin Dvar Hiskinu Bezdin. There were 7 takanas that were made. What we just mentioned was one of them, but there's now another 6 that the Mishnah mentions. If a Gentile sent a carbon oila from Medinas Hayam, and over here we're talking about the sheet of Rabbi Akiva, who says carbon oila is required, otherwise they cannot send a carbon other than a carbon oila, and also, agav, it's only what's considered to be shchiach that was mentioned in Medinas Hayam, but huadin would be from Eretz Yisrael. And if you would send the money that was used to buy the nesachim, then it would be craving. The imlav craving mishel tzibur. If it was not sent money, then the bezdin were mesakin that it would come from the money of the tzibur that they would buy the nesachim. This would be because of darkei shalom. Another takana, v'chein ger shemeis v'iniach zvachim. A ger, unlike somebody else who dies, who leaves his property to a yaresh. When it comes to a ger, so a ger doesn't have yarshim, even if he had children from before. But once he became a nizgayer, so then he's considered to be not having those children, and therefore at this point, if he then dies, his mammon becomes hefker. So it states, if the ger dies and he niach zvochim, and he left over different karbonos, he designated animals as karbonos, im yesh lo nesachim craving mishlo. If he has nesachim that he set aside, then you can use those nesachim to be niskarev, to be brought as a carbon together with this zvochim. However, v'im lav craving mishel tzibur. But if not, since his mammon is now hefker, so therefore the nesachim have to be bought from the tzibur. Another mentioning of a Tanai, of a takana. Tanai bezdin hu al kohen gadol shemeis shetei minchasa krev mishel tzibur. Here we're talking about where the kohen gadol, he would bring a minchas chavitin every day, which was an asiras ha'efa, every day, 1/2 in the morning, 1/2 in the afternoon, and it would be brought from his own money. So it says over here that the Bezdin enacted that what was originally the case, that was that the money, let's say if the Kohen Gadol was not then nobody was appointed in his place as a new Kohen Gadol, so then that Minchas Chavitin had to be brought. That would be brought from the tzibur, and that was the original takana. Now, it wasn't a new takana as if the Bezdin made the takana. This was what was really required minat Torah. Rabbi Yehuda Oimer Mishel Yarshin. Rabbi Yehuda says no, that minat Torah was required is that the Yarshin provide the money for the Minchas Chavitin. The Mishnah comments, whether you go like the Tanakam or like Rabbi Yehuda, the Shleimo Haisa Krevo, it was a Shleimo that was brought during this Tekufa between one Kohen Gadol dying and another Kohen Gadol being then appointed. It was not just a half in the morning, half at night, but rather a full Asiras Ha'efa in the morning, Asiras Ha'efa in the evening. Here it states that they also made a takana that it's not going to be me'ilah if the kohen uses the melach or the eitzim in regards to then cooking and eating the koche kadoshim in the azara. Here they used to then go ahead and sometimes use the efer hapara. And there was a concern that would be a problem of mi'ilah. So they made a takana that since people were concerned that it would be considered mi'ilah if you use the efer, they would use it, let's say, for their wounds. So then in the Safek Tumah, they would not want to use the efer hapara. So the Chachamim made an enactment that there's no mi'ilah on the efer hapara, which is really minat Torah as well. Alakinim v'apsoiles shiyu v'alapsulois shiyu boos mishel tzibur. Those kinim, those pair of birds, let's say were brought, let's say from a woman who had given birth a yoledes, and they became posul. So now these are mechusar kippurim. How does these women get a kapara? If indeed they were not brought, they put their money, let's say, in the shofar for kinin, and now all of those birds were bought with that money, but it was found out that one of those birds were posted or got lost. So how would indeed they get the kapara that's necessary? So it states over here, al hakinim hapsula sheyu boys mishal tzibur. That would then be brought from the tzibur. The Tanakama holds that they would use money from the lishka that would then buy these additional birds to compensate for any birds that became postal or lost. Whereas Rabbi Yossi Omer ha-mesapek is akinin, hu mesapek is apsulos. Those vendors who would regularly provide to the Beis HaMikdash the birds, so those vendors, they would have to then also have a certain contract with the Beis HaMikdash that if any birds became postal, they'd have to provide additional birds, and it would come from their funds. And therefore, the women, again, who are mechusei kapara, would always get the kapara of the kinim to allow them to eat kachim.